Most people are not stuck because they lack effort. They're stuck because of how they think about time. From the moment they wake up, their mind is already locked into a narrow window today. What needs to be done? What problems must be solved? What tasks have to be finished before the day ends? It feels productive. It feels responsible, but it quietly traps them. Because when your thinking is limited to days, your decisions become short-term. You begin choosing what feels urgent instead of what actually builds something meaningful. You react to pressure instead of positioning for growth. And over time, this pattern keeps you busy, but never truly moving forward. There is another way to think, but it doesn't feel natural at first. It stretches beyond quick results, beyond immediate wins, into something slower, quieter, and far more powerful. The people who build real wealth, real influence, real control over their lives are not rushing from one result to the next. They are thinking in years. They make decisions today that may not show results tomorrow, or next week, or even next month. And that's exactly why most people never understand them. Because when results are delayed, it feels like nothing is happening. It feels like wasted effort. It feels like you're doing something wrong. And in that silence, most people quit. Not because the path is wrong, but because it doesn't reward them fast enough to keep them convinced. But what if that silence is not failure? What if it is the process working exactly as it should? What if the absence of immediate results is the sign that you are finally playing a different game, one that doesn't reward impatience, but multiplies consistency over time? Think about how many times you started something with excitement, only to lose momentum when progress slowed down. Not because the path was wrong, but because the results didn't come fast enough. That is the trap of short-term thinking. It trains you to expect quick feedback, quick validation, quick proof that what you're doing is working. And when that proof doesn't appear, doubt begins to grow. Action fades, and you walk away just before something valuable begins to take shape. Because the most powerful outcomes don't grow on your timeline. They grow quietly, beneath the surface, long before they become visible. And if you don't understand that, you will abandon progress before it ever has a chance to appear. There is a discipline here that most people never develop. Not the discipline of working harder, but the discipline of patience. Not passive waiting, but active persistence. The ability to keep moving forward without needing constant confirmation. To trust your direction, even when results are not immediate. And this is where separation begins. While others jump from one opportunity to another, chasing faster results, you remain steady. You continue building. You continue refining. You continue improving. And slowly, something shifts. Because time is not neutral. It either works against you or for you. If you keep restarting, chasing quick wins, resetting your progress, time works against you. But if you stay consistent, if you remain long enough, time begins to work in your favor. It begins to multiply your effort. And when that happens, everything changes. There is a condition so common that most people never question it. It does not feel like a limitation. It feels like normal life. A man wakes up, looks at what must be done before the day ends, and begins working through it. He completes tasks, responds to demands, handles responsibilities, and by the time night comes, he feels he has done what was required. It appears productive. It appears responsible. But hidden inside this pattern is a quiet limitation, because everything he does is confined within a single day. If I were to begin again, I would not first look at how much I am doing. I would look at the span within which I am thinking, because a man can be constantly active and still remain confined. He can complete many things and still build very little. And this is not because he lacks effort. It is because his thinking has never extended beyond the immediate. Most people measure progress by what is completed today. They ask themselves, what did I finish? What remains? What must be done before tomorrow? These questions create movement, but they do not necessarily create direction, because what is completed today may have very little impact on what is built over time. And this is where the illusion begins. There is also the illusion of urgency. Many tasks feel important because they demand attention immediately. They create pressure. They give the feeling that something must be done right now. And in responding to them, a man feels productive. But urgency is not the same as importance. In fact, what is urgent often prevents what is truly significant, because the things that build a future rarely demand immediate attention. They require deliberate attention. They require time. They require consistency. And most importantly, they require patience. If I were beginning again, I would separate these two clearly. I would no longer allow urgency to decide my direction, because a life built on reaction is never truly directed. It is guided by whatever appears next. There are many people who live entirely within this narrow window of a single day. They wake up, they respond, they complete, they rest, and then they repeat, day after day, year after year. Their schedule is full, their effort is consistent, but their position remains largely unchanged. Not because they lack ability, but because their thinking has never expanded beyond the present. If I were beginning again, I would expand that window, because a man cannot build something he never considers beyond today. There is also the influence of environment. A man looks around and sees others doing the same thing, talking about daily responsibilities, measuring success by how much was completed today. And because it is common, it feels correct. But what is common is not always effective. What is repeated is not always optimal. And what is widely accepted is often never questioned. If I were beginning again, I would not confuse activity with progress, because movement is not the same as construction. Movement fills time. It creates visible effort. It gives the appearance of productivity. But construction requires something different. It requires direction. It requires thinking beyond the present moment. It requires actions that may not produce immediate results, but lead to something greater over time. If I were beginning again, I would not seek to stay busy. I would seek to build. There have always been men who understood this difference. Henry Ford did not measure his progress by what was completed in a single day. He thought in systems. He thought in processes. He looked beyond immediate tasks and into long-term structure. And because of that, what he built extended far beyond daily effort. If I were beginning again, I would study that approach. Because the difference is not in how hard a man works, it is in how far ahead he thinks. There is also a direct impact on decision-making. A man who thinks only in days chooses what resolves quickly. He avoids what takes time. He prioritizes completion over development. And over time, this creates a pattern of small, short-term results. But a man who thinks in years chooses differently. He chooses what builds even if it does not finish today. He chooses what compounds even if it does not reward him immediately. And in doing so, his results begin to expand beyond the present. There is also a hidden pressure created by daily thinking. When a man measures himself every day, he begins to feel inadequate when results are not immediate. He questions his direction. He doubts his decisions. And often he changes course too early. But what he does not realize is that the process he interrupted required time. If I were beginning again, I would remove this pressure. I would stop measuring daily results. And instead, I would observe direction. Because direction determines outcome. Not a single day, not a single result, but the path repeated over time. There is also the cost of constant reaction. A man who responds to everything that appears does not control his time. His time controls him. His actions are dictated by circumstances, not by intention. And over time, this creates a life that is active but not designed. If I were beginning again, I would take control of direction, because once direction is clear, action becomes more powerful. Not because you do more, but because what you do begins to matter. There is also how others perceive this. A man who lives day by day appears busy, responsible, engaged, but rarely is he seen as someone building something greater. Because building requires vision. It requires patience. It requires thinking beyond what is immediately visible. If I were beginning again, I would not aim to appear productive. I would aim to become directed, because direction creates results that activity never can. There is also a realization that must come. Daily effort is necessary, but it is not enough. Without a broader perspective, effort will continue to produce the same results, again and again, until years pass, and nothing significant has changed. But once a man expands his thinking, something shifts. He begins to look beyond today. He begins to consider what his actions will produce over time, and in that moment, his behavior begins to change. He becomes less reactive, less rushed, more focused, more deliberate. There is also a calm that comes with this shift. A man who thinks in years does not panic over a single day. He does not feel pressure to win immediately. He moves with purpose because he understands that what he is building requires time, and that understanding changes everything. If I were to express this as a principle, it would be this: do not confine your thinking to what must be done today. Consider what must be built over time. Fix this idea firmly in your mind. I act with direction. I build beyond the present. I do not remain trapped within the narrow window of today. Because a man who thinks only in days may remain active his entire life and still never truly advance. But a man who begins to think beyond the present begins to build something that continues, grows, and compounds. And that is where real progress begins. Having understood that most people live confined within the narrow frame of a single day, the next principle becomes clear. The real reason they remain there is not a lack of effort. It is the expectation of immediate results. A man begins something with energy. He commits, he acts, he applies effort. But almost immediately, he begins to look for proof that what he is doing is working. And when that proof does not appear quickly, something begins to change. Doubt. If I were beginning again, I would not look for immediate confirmation, because what is built to last is rarely visible in its early stages. There is a misunderstanding that must be corrected. Most people believe that progress must be seen in order to be real, that results must appear quickly in order to be valid. But this belief traps them in short cycles, because anything that requires time appears unproductive in the beginning, and so they abandon it. Not because it was wrong, but because it was slow. If I were beginning again, I would separate visibility from reality, because what is unseen may still be growing. There is a stage, a quiet stage, where everything important is happening beneath the surface. But most people never stay long enough to reach it. They begin, they act, then they wait. They look for change. They measure too early, and when nothing appears, they withdraw. They move on. They start again somewhere else. And in doing so, they return to the beginning again and again. If I were beginning again, I would remain in that stage, because that is where real construction happens. There are many who stood at the edge of progress without realizing it. They had already invested enough time for something to begin forming, but just before it became visible, they stopped. They walked away. They reset, and everything they had built began to fade. If I were beginning again, I would not leave what is unseen. I would continue, because growth does not announce itself. It builds quietly. It forms structure before it produces results. It strengthens beneath the surface long before it reveals anything on the outside. And if you do not understand that, you will abandon progress before it has a chance to appear. There is also a clear separation between two types of people. The first needs constant confirmation. He acts, but only if he sees results quickly. If not, he changes direction. The second continues regardless. He builds. He refines. He persists, even without visible proof. And over time, their paths separate completely. Not because one is more talented, but because one remained. If I were beginning again, I would choose persistence over confirmation, because persistence allows accumulation. And accumulation leads to something far more powerful: compounding. This is the force most people never fully experience, because they never stay long enough. They believe each action stands alone, that what they do today is separate from yesterday. But that is not true. Every action builds upon the last. Every repetition adds to what already exists. And when this continues without interruption, something begins to multiply. At first, it feels slow, almost invisible. A man may work, improve, refine, and see very little change. And because of that, he begins to question whether it is worth continuing. But beneath the surface, something is happening. Something is building. If I were beginning again, I would trust that process. Because compounding does not show itself early. It rewards those who remain. There are many who begin with strong intention. They commit, they act, they push forward. But when results do not come quickly, they stop. They pause. They redirect. And in doing so, they interrupt the process. What they had built weakens. What could have multiplied is reset. If I were beginning again, I would not interrupt, because interruption is the greatest enemy of compounding. There is also the man who stays. He does not see immediate results, but he continues. He repeats. He refines. And slowly, something begins to change. His actions become more effective. His understanding deepens. His results begin to grow, not suddenly, but steadily. And then, over time, what once felt slow begins to accelerate. What once seemed small begins to expand. And the results that took so long to appear begin to show all at once. To someone thinking in days, it looks like luck. It looks sudden. It looks unexpected. But to someone thinking in years, it is expected. Because it is the natural result of staying long enough. There have always been men who understood this. Thomas Edison did not measure his progress by immediate success. He continued through repeated attempts, through unseen adjustments, through effort that showed no immediate return. But each attempt added something. Each repetition moved him forward. Nothing was wasted. Everything accumulated. If I were beginning again, I would adopt that mindset. There is also the emotional challenge in this stage. A man may feel uncertain. He may question himself. He may wonder if he is on the right path. These feelings are natural. They appear when the mind seeks proof that has not yet arrived. But if those feelings control action, progress stops. If I were beginning again, I would not allow feelings to dictate direction, because feelings change, but direction must remain. There is also a discipline required here, not intense effort, not force, but consistency, the ability to continue again and again without needing immediate reward, to act without constant validation, to build without needing proof. If I were beginning again, I would build that discipline, because it separates those who start from those who finish. There is also a transformation that begins to occur. A man who once needed immediate results begins to expect delay, not as failure but as part of the process. He becomes patient, not passive but active. He continues with intention, and over time, his confidence changes. It is no longer based on quick success. It is based on something stronger, his ability to remain. There is also a shift in identity. He no longer sees himself as someone chasing results. He sees himself as someone building. And that identity changes everything, because it influences every decision he makes. He no longer chooses what is fast. He chooses what lasts. There is also the way others see him. At first, they may not understand. They may question his pace. They may doubt his direction, because they measure progress by what they can see. But when results finally appear, their perception changes. What was once ignored becomes recognized. What was once questioned becomes respected. If I were beginning again, I would not rely on early recognition. I would rely on continued effort, because recognition comes later, but results come from consistency. There is also a critical danger: restarting. Starting something new feels exciting. It gives immediate motivation, immediate energy, but it destroys accumulation. Every restart resets progress. Every shift delays results. And most people live in this cycle, starting over again and again, never staying long enough to experience compounding. If I were beginning again, I would resist that temptation. Because the real advantage does not come from starting. It comes from staying. There is also a final realization. Extraordinary results are not produced by intensity alone. They are produced by sustained effort applied without interruption over time. If I were to express this as a principle, it would be this. Continue beyond the point where results are visible. Fix this deeply in your mind. I build without needing proof. I continue without interruption. I trust what is forming. Because the moment you understand this, everything changes. You stop chasing quick wins. You stop measuring daily outcomes. You stop questioning every step. And instead, you begin to build quietly, consistently, relentlessly. And over time, that consistency becomes impossible to compete with. In the end, the difference is not in effort. It is not in intelligence. It is not even in opportunity. It is in how a man thinks about time. Most people live inside the pressure of the day. They wake up focused on what must be done, what must be solved, what must be completed before time runs out. And because of that, their entire life becomes a series of short cycles: effort, result, reset. They move constantly, but they do not build, because building requires something most people never fully develop: the ability to think beyond today, the ability to act without immediate reward, the ability to remain when nothing seems to be happening. This is where the separation truly happens. Not in a moment, not in a single decision, but in a pattern. One man chooses what gives results quickly. He seeks proof. He measures daily. And when that proof is not there, he changes direction. He restarts. He moves again. Another man chooses differently. He chooses direction over speed. He chooses consistency over excitement. He chooses long-term construction over short-term completion. And because of that, his actions begin to accumulate. At first, the difference is invisible. Both appear active. Both appear committed. But over time, something begins to shift. The first man continues to start over. The second man continues to build. And eventually, that difference becomes undeniable. Because time is not neutral. It either multiplies your effort or it erases it. If you constantly reset, constantly change direction, constantly chase what is immediate, time works against you. But if you remain, if you stay aligned, if you continue without interruption, time begins to work for you. It begins to compound your effort. It begins to amplify your results. And when that happens, everything changes. What once felt slow begins to accelerate. What once felt small begins to expand. What once felt uncertain becomes clear. And to others, it may look sudden. It may look like luck. It may look like something that happened overnight. But you know the truth. It was built quietly, patiently. Over time, this is why most people never reach it. Not because they cannot, but because they do not stay long enough. They do not think far enough. They do not trust the process long enough to allow it to work. But once you understand this, you cannot go back. You no longer measure your life by what happens today. You begin to measure it by direction. You no longer ask, what did I gain today? You ask, am I still building something that matters? And that single shift changes everything. Because it removes pressure, it removes doubt. It removes the constant need for proof and replaces it with something far more powerful: clarity. You begin to move differently, think differently, decide differently. You no longer react to every distraction. You no longer chase every opportunity. You become selective, focused, deliberate. And in that state, your actions gain strength, not because you are doing more, but because you are doing what matters, consistently, over time. So the question is no longer how fast you can succeed. The real question is, how long are you willing to stay committed? Because that answer determines everything. It determines whether your effort will be multiplied or wasted, whether your progress will compound or reset, whether your life will be a cycle of motion or a structure that continues to grow. If I were to leave you with one principle, it would be this: Do not live confined to the day. Think beyond it. Act beyond it. Build beyond it. Fix this deeply within your mind. I do not measure my life in days. I build in years. Because your future is not created in moments. It is created in the time you are willing to stay the course. And once you understand that, you stop chasing success and start constructing it.